What is up? Stop the presses. We have some information for you here on the Coast to Coast podcast. This is an emergency edition of the pod, and we're still brought to you by Johnny T-shirt. All right, I'm Joey Powell. Emergency edition of the Coast to Coast podcast. You know what that means. Usually big news for the Tar Heel basketball program. And today is no different as the Tar Heels have secured a commitment from Elliot Cadeau, a 6'1", 165-pound point guard, originally from Bergen, New Jersey. It's upstate, that area up there. I think Bergen is upstate. I know Hubert Davis loves him some New York, New Jersey guys. So we're going to say Bergen is upstate, but it's New Jersey. Who cares? He now currently plays at the Link Academy in Branson, Missouri, and plays for the New Heights Lightning on the EYBL circuit. But why this matters? He's the number one point guard in his class, number 8 player overall currently, as 24/7 Sports lists him. To break this all down, we got to have Sherrell McMillan and Sean Moran. Sherrell, how you living, man?
I'm good. Exciting news for UNC basketball.
Absolutely,
Long time coming, I guess.
absolutely. Sean Moran, how you feeling, buddy?
Doing well.
Yeah, you've been in the cave watching cut-ups, I'm sure. Sherrell, let's start this out. I mean, this is a huge recruit for Hubert Davis and his staff. He's obviously a top 10 kid. The kid is got dual citizenship with the U.S. and Sweden. He's got a 5-figure NIL deal with Vitamin Well, which is apparently is a drink from Sweden. He's a Rock Nation kid. All of these things are new to us and new to the college basketball landscape. But at the end of the day, he's still a top 10 overall player and the number one point guard in the class. It's a big deal. Tell us how UNC got him.
It is a huge deal, and I would go so far as to say it's kind of the first um, recruit of the new era for UNC, and that's kind of in this NIL representation era where players have a ton of power and players are kind of using that to determine the best possible situation for them on and off the court. That's what guys did before, but the reasoning was slightly different. And I think with Cadeau, in addition to what Hubert Davis and Jeff Lebo and Brad Frederick and Sean May told him about the UNC program, which is, their guards have freedom. They want to get up and down the court. The need for kind of that true point guard, which is what we'll talk about, I think, a lot when it comes to Cadeau. But also, he saw what happened to the players on the team last year when they got to the biggest stage of, the national championship Final Four with North Carolina on their shirts. It was very lucrative for them in many areas. And so I think what you're seeing is the first time a recruit for North Carolina's purposes didn't just say, well, what can you do for me right now? He saw kind of a vision of, wow, this is North Carolina basketball. And there's a lot of stuff and a lot of fans and a lot of things that come with North Carolina basketball. What a great opportunity for me on the court as well as off the court. So I think that's why I say it's kind of the first one of this new era, because I think those are the things he considered. It wasn't just, I love North Carolina basketball and they need a point guard. It was those things. Plus, well, look at what North Carolina basketball can do for me off the court as far as NIL and those other factors. So did not think we'd be talking about this 3 months ago, I must admit. So a huge win for Hubert Davis and his staff. This is the second with an asterisk top 10 commit that they've gotten in just over, what, I guess 20 months now, 19 months since he took over. So a big deal and at the most important position.
Absolutely. If you know anything about college ball now, it's that point guards make all the difference in the world. And if you go back and look at North Carolina's history, when they've excelled is when they've had somebody great handling the ball for them and kind of triggering the offense. Sean, I'm going to come back to Sherrell for this because he wrote the piece that's on Inside Carolina right now about the slanderous dubbing of a point guard now as a true point guard and kind of all the negative connotation that's come with that. But when I've watched this kid, I see a kid that's just got, as the kids say, some sick bounce. He's quick to change direction. Tell us why he's so much more than a point guard.
Well, yeah, I think he is much more than a point guard, but the great thing is that he is a pass first guard. I'd say his main strength is his passing ability, is his ability to read where people are going, how the defense is going to react. And I think that was a staple in some of UNC's earlier point guards under Roy Williams before they became more the scorers first. more the 2-1s that we've been seeing. But to your point, Joey, we'll put passing aside for the second, but yeah, he can fill it up in Peach Jam. He had numerous double-digit scoring performances. He played in Europe this summer in the U18 European B division, and he had 33 points in the gold medal game. So he can fill it up pretty quickly, and he can do it in a variety of ways. From outside shooting to attacking the basket, to even, I'd say right now he's probably most comfortable stop and popping from 15 to 17 feet as well. So he's got a pretty dynamic arsenal, and definitely excited to see how that continues to grow before his time at Chapel Hill.
Yeah, one of the things that you usually see with kids like this is they end up developing a jump shot, they end up developing their offensive game, but he's got a lot of tools in his toolbox right now. Sherrell, you want to elaborate a little bit more about kind of the trying to shoehorn players like this into the true point guard and why it's kind of a misnomer?
Well, let me start with, there was a point in time where even saying point guard was kind of dirty. We changed our nomenclature
Lead guard
to say lead guard, and I think for too long there's this notion that there should be a guy on the team who can't shoot, who doesn't contribute anything offensively other than passing, and that's the person who sets everything up. And I think we've gone to more to like primary facilitator, that kind of language, because the guy with the ball in his hand has to be able to score because he's got the ball in his hands the most. So I think a non-scoring point guard in this day and age, you really hurt your team. But that shouldn't be at the expense of being able to run the team, to facilitate, to pass, to do all those things that traditional point guards do. And I think that's where the term lead guard came from, because you're kind of molding those two, what used to be two different positions, into one, which allows a lot of the dynamic shooting guards and guys who are primary scorers to do their thing, because you have someone at the one who can do a little bit of everything. Then that person at the two or at the three or wherever they are can focus on scoring. So that's part of it. And then with Cadeau in general, man, like Sean said, just his passing ability. I'm not going to say it hasn't been seen in Chapel Hill for a while, but the consistency in which he does it, the things that he can see before it happens. I was always told that's the sign of a great point guard, is someone who can kind of see the pass ahead of the pass. That's what Kendall Marshall was so good at UNC back in the day. And Cadeau definitely has that. You talk to, Deshaun London, who's watched him for the last, I think, 5 or 6 years since he was like in 7th grade. Deshaun's a 24/7 national recruiting analyst. Eric Bossy, Adam, the whole crew, they all just rave about his passing ability. And I think talking to some people close to the UNC program, same thing. They acknowledge that he's not, I don't know if he'll ever be like a 25 points per game person, even though he can score 25 or 30 in a game. But they just rave about his ability to pass and set things up. So that's something that's different from UNC's current guards, and that's not a demerit to them at all, because they just play a different style. But this is something that UNC hasn't had in some time.
You're going to make a lot of our listeners happy when you mention the name Kendall Marshall, because just even the way that kid's career ended at UNC, there's a lot of folks that remember him incredibly fondly, and how he was able to facilitate with so many other talents on that squad. And to your point, he could score if he needed to. Sherrell, I want to stay here a little bit. We talked about earlier how different your recruiting is now, and how Cadeau's kind of the first of these line of new recruits in the area of name image, and then era of name, image, and likeness. How important is getting a kid like this for Hubert Davis right now, for the 24 class? How big of a deal is this?
It's like getting the quarterback in football. It's the first position you usually try to secure in your class. Obviously, they had Joey Powell commit back in September, so he's not the first one. But now, the future of the backcourt is pretty much set for UNC for at least a year or two, between R.J. Davis and Simeon Wilcher, and now Cadeau and DeMarco Dunn and Seth Trimble. Whatever all those guys decide to do, Hubert Davis has shown a propensity, if you look at Adrian's stuff from a couple of days ago, to play 3 guard lineups, to play multiple ball handlers at the same time. So he's going to have plenty of options to do that. I think with Cadeau, another reason he's kind of a new era recruit is because, frankly, we don't know when he's going to arrive in Chapel Hill, and that is new territory for UNC. He has the ability, if he wants, to reclass into 2023. which means he would arrive in June in June, this coming June, or he can stay in 2024, which means he would enroll not this coming June of 2023, but June of 2024. And I think that decision will come probably after EYBL. He said that he wants to play again. And I think a lot of it will be determined by who stays and who goes. So just the fact that we don't know what class he's in yet, again, is just a different thing for UNC basketball and how they've typically recruited and how players typically come.
And he is an older kid for his class, right?
Correct.
Okay. Sean, I want to ask you, you've had a chance to see Cadeau play a little bit, but in a couple of different settings. I mentioned earlier, he's got dual citizenship with Sweden as well. So he's played internationally. He's played, like I said earlier, with the New Heights Lightning and EYBL circuit, and he's playing at Link Academy. Sean, can you break down a little bit about how his roles might vary in those different settings?
Yeah, to your point, he has played in a lot of different settings. One thing to touch on about the age. So he turned, correct me if I'm wrong, but he turned 18 this September. So basically would have been old if he had been a senior, which means next year if he stays in high school, he'll be turning 19, and if he does stay in the class, he'll be 20. Basically when starting his Chapel Hill career, which definitely errs on the side of usually sophomore in terms of age, but from on the court, freshman year played at Bergen Catholic. I think played around 11 games, and their season was cut short because of COVID. He missed his whole sophomore season because of an ankle injury, and he didn't really, I think, pick up AAU until the second live period or late in the springtime. So, really those 2 years, even though he's older, he's still pretty young just from an experience standpoint. And I think you've seen a lot of his numbers start to increase, especially when it started to come July from either the Kansas City EYBL or the Peach Jam EYBL, and then into play overseas. So going, AAU, definitely very athletic setting that you're going against in the Nike EYBL. And he more than held his own, kind of had a dynamic duo for the New Heights Lightning guard spots. And even in Peach Jam was going against some of the top players, best athletes. And then all of a sudden he goes over to Europe and Sweden, where he probably has maybe a few practices under his belt, doesn't have, I don't think, that much experience with his teammates, and he's forced into a new role now where he is easily one of the more athletic and better players there. So he's asked to score more. But you can't go over there and all of a sudden, you're shooting 30 shots a game and not passing the ball. So it did show his ability to take on that scoring lead, but doing so while getting everybody involved. And just from looking at some of his averages and his numbers there, I mean, he was going back to the gold medal game, 33 points, I think 9 assists, something around that. And the thing with him, he does have a propensity to maybe over dribble or force a pass here and there, but a lot of that is because he is reading what the defense is doing almost a step before everybody else. And in that gold medal game, he committed 2 turnovers in the third quarter, and Denmark had cut it to 4 points. They took him out to settle him down. When he came back in, the lead was 6. But right when he came back in, all of a sudden it was pushed out to 14 real quick in terms of attacking the paint, getting other teammates involved, and kind of mixing up the scoring and the passing. And then finally, Link Academy, I think by most publications, ranked number 1 in high school right now. They just played 2 games in the City of Palms tournament, undefeated, and you have guys, pretty much the whole starting lineup is high major Division I. So once again, now you're in more of a facilitator role. You don't need to score nearly as much. But in the first game of City of Palms, it was a tied game with 42 seconds left, and Cadeau took the ball, attacked the basket, and hit what was the game-winning bucket. So I think all that being said, all those different experiences will help him when he does get to Chapel Hill, when everybody is very talented, and he's going to need to fit in different circumstances depending on who's around him on the court as well as who's on the team at that current time.
Yeah, it's one hell of a resume, all that stuff you just listed out. Sean, real quick for the folks that are that are interested, what do you think was his best performance over the past EYBL season that people could probably go find on YouTube?
Well, it's pretty easy to find highlights on YouTube, but I'd say probably his last game, in Peach Jam, he had 16 and 9. One of the games I got to watch in Kansas City, which was actually an extremely fun one because it ended up being the last game of the day, went into overtime and ended on a buzzer beater. If I remember, that one was against Mocan Elite. He had 15 and 8. Um, and then in terms of entertainment value was probably the CP3 game, which was his second to last game. He had 15 and 8. Only shot 6 of 14, so he wasn't as efficient as maybe he normally is, but he was going against Dillingham and Holloway and really turned it on in the second half. New Heights Lightning was playing from behind a majority of the game, and there's a little stretch in the fourth quarter where 2 steals, a bucket, was against some really nice assists, playing strong defense as well. So I'd say the CP3 game from an entertainment perspective, but then the All Ohio game from a better performance, and then finally that Sweden Denmark gold medal game is on YouTube, and that was an entertaining one to watch as well.
So a little behind the scenes of kind of how we do things at IC. So again, we went back in April last year to Orlando. That was the first session of UYBL. It was 3.5 days after the national championship game. So that tells you kind of puts you in the place where we were. Cadeau wasn't there at that setting, so we didn't get a chance to see him. And so the way it works out is that we can't travel everywhere. So we chose to go back down for a top 100 camp. Sean was at EYBL in Kansas, but we kind of missed Cadeau because we weren't able to. He didn't play that first session, and we didn't have another chance to see him for a while. So our first real opportunity to see him was at Peach Jam, and we, obviously Hubert Davis and staff have been talking to him, so it wasn't like this one game was make it or break it for him or anything when as far as an offer. So we're set up, me and Ben on the side, ready to watch. They have another guy, another guard on the team, Tahad Pettiford, who's another really good kind of combo lead guard who's going to go to a high major school. And the team was terrible. I mean, they were awful that night. They were bad. They lost to somebody they had no business losing to. And we're sitting there like, oh, so what's going to happen now? Because Hubert, he didn't look enthused. You can't take how the coaches are looking on the sideline as too much from one game. So then the next day we find out that UNC is offered while at Peach Jam. We're like, okay, well, we're going to go see him. But the way it worked out, there was another prospect who has since gone to a different school playing at the same time. So I went and watched the first half of that CP3 game, New Heights CP3, but I had to go watch the other prospect in the second half. So it didn't get to see kind of that, I guess, explosion. When I left the game, they were down by 16 or 17. It wasn't close at all. So just a little of the minutia of how we try to operate and get to see guys. Suffice to say, the first time we saw him, he wasn't good. But then from there on, every time I've seen highlights or watched him, he's been good. So,
Sherrell, you touched a minute ago on the fact that he's got a decision to make with regard to reclass. I think historically, point guards have struggled with reclassifying and just, I don't know if it's the speed of the game, if it's the size or the strength or whatever, the myriad of problems might be. Is Cadeau a different kid? Like, is this the type of thing that because he's a little older and because he's had such an array of experience that it might actually work for him? Or am I just, am I being hope upon hope here?
no, I think the fact that he's aware of those struggles, even, he's done plenty of interviews where he's mentioned that when we talked to him after his UNC visit, he talked about just, reclassing it with point guards has traditionally, like you said, not gone well, and he's aware of it. So my thinking is if you're aware that there's a potential problem, then you're less likely to, commit that problem. I think some of the guys in the past just thought they were the best thing ever and thought, oh, I can reclass and be good and go to the NBA after 1 year. And it's not as easy as it seems. So I think the fact that he is aware of that will help him as he decides what to do. But again, just to reiterate, this is a huge commitment for UNC. If you go back, basically, I guess 23 years, let's just go back to 2000. The point guards or lead guards, whatever you want to call them, who are ranked in the top 10 that UNC has either committed or signed, it's a short list. It's Raymond Felton, it's Ty Lawson, it's Cole Anthony, and it's Caleb Love, and now it's Elliot Cadeau. So that's 5 guys in 23 years. So it doesn't happen often. And I think each of those guys has either had a ton of success at the college level, the NBA level, or both. Caleb is still TBD as far as the NBA, but I think most people would take his college career with some of the shots he's hit and some of the things he's done. And then Felton and Lawson both won. I'm drawing a blank. The Cousy Award, both Cousy Award winners. And then Cole obviously was a first round pick. So usually when Carolina gets a player of this caliber, he has a really good career, whether it be at UNC or both in the NBA as well.
Sean, I want to get your take as well on how reclassifying usually sets up for a point guard prospect and why it typically doesn't work. I threw out a couple of things, but in your opinion, what's been the big hurdle there for players who reclass at that position to get over?
I mean, I think no matter if you're just going from EYBL into college or high school, there's going to be that significant athleticism and strength. Just adjustment that needs to be made going into the need to really learn how to, you need to know how to run all the plays. You need to be the quarterback at that position. And I think the combination of those can definitely take some time. I think you've seen at UNC, it's been rare for somebody to jump in and just snap of the fingers, they're running. And obviously there's differences between Roy's offense and Hubert's offense, but Kobe White was one that got it right away. But I think there is that just athleticism and strength, just physical adjustment that needs to be made. But then there's a lot more expected from really knowing the plays, knowing the call outs, knowing how your teammates are playing, that there's a lot that's expected of the point guard versus maybe somebody that's a 3 or a 4.
All right, Sean, last question for you, and I'll hand it to Sherrell to put a bow on this thing before we get out of here. To me, the the uneducated eye, I see a 6'1" kid that's got some ups. I mean, he's been quite impressive finishing on the break. He's, as you mentioned earlier, he's really good at distributing the ball, and sometimes some of his teammates are shocked that he's getting them the ball in those positions. What else are we missing about this kid? Am I oversimplifying, or is he just is this what a number one point guard in a class looks like?
It's funny, and I don't know if it's me, but I think when initially watching him, if you're just watching him in the half court set, you can tell that he's quick, but I don't think his athleticism jumps off immediately. But then once you're seeing him in that full court into the transition, and I know he's listed at 6'1", but there's always an inch or two added to those. So I'm not sure what his actual height is. Haven't seen any actual measurements on wingspan, but it doesn't look like he's super long. So when you do see him on the break and you see him just rise up so easily off that left foot and throwing down dunks, you're taken aback for a second. We talked about NIL, so he does have his own website. There's a self-reported 33-inch standing vertical and 41 on there, which almost matches up with what Cole Anthony had in high school, although he was much more of a 2-footed leaper. Same with Trimble, who that that athleticism jumps off the screen. But in terms of Cadeau, I think I'm thinking the best way to phrase this, he almost takes a lot from those point guards that Sherrell mentioned, and maybe is not going to outdo them at their best trait. I would put him a shade below Kendall Marshall in passing, and definitely not at Ty Lawson's quickness, but he's kind of up there in that upper quartile in really all those factors, which I think makes him that number one point guard. And then, one other thing, we haven't really talked defense at all, and I think he has pretty quick feet on defense. He's good at closing out. I think the size, people will definitely try to take advantage of that, whether it's posting him up or trying to get him on bigger players. So I think that'll be one of the main things to watch defensively. And then offensively is just how his shooting continues to progress. Going through all of his stats, there's around 130 track threes. I know there's a lot more than that. And he was shooting I think 30%, 31% on those. But when you're looking more Peach Jam and Kansas City, so July Nike, as well as European basketball, he's up over 40%. I think in Sherrell's weekly scoop, he had him at 38% in high school. But I'd say that's definitely one area to watch. And then last thing is just how will that dynamic work depending on whether he reclasses or not. Most likely there could be Seth Trimble as well as Simeon Wiltshire. And you kind of have a lot of guys that play well with the ball in their hands. I think Simeon Wiltshire is a guy that would rather distribute than be a 30-point scorer. So I think, how do those guys play together? Who, if any, becomes the alpha scorer, or who will that be on the UNC team? But for the most part, it's a dynamic point guard that is very, very strong in a lot of categories and is a great get for UNC.
And something I should have asked you about, I feel like just his patience is something that jumps out at you. Maybe that's why he doesn't look as quick, but he definitely looks under control.
Yeah, I think he's always under control. It's rare to see him get sped up. So he's kind of operating at the pace he wants to operate at, and then all of a sudden, off the pick and roll, it's a quick move for a pop, spotting up from 15, or it's a quick first step, in that City of Palms game that got him by off the dribble. Sometimes though he does, if he's not getting by defenders off that first step, he loves to go to this left to right crossover, which can free him up a lot of times. But I think sometimes he can struggle to free himself initially, but at the same time, since he is playing under control, he can usually dictate where he wants to go and how he wants to get there. And then he has a variety of moves and counter moves once he's in motion, as well as when he does get that step, he knows exactly where a cutter is or where that open man is. And, I know we haven't seen that many alley-oops at UNC over the years, but I think you'll definitely be seeing a lot with the ball in his hands and with with who UNC has on the wings and the big men.
All right, Sean, last thing. I know I said that 2 questions ago, but is there anything you want to say about, I know you've got a breakdown on the site now and some video, anything else you want to share for folks to look to that might give them some insight about his game?
Yeah, so there's an article that is coming out with a commitment that goes through really his offensive and defensive abilities. The video only focuses on the City of Palms, which was 2 games, and he went from having a 15-point, 9-assist game to the second game, didn't score in a blowout win, but he did have some nice passes as well. But I would definitely check out some of what we were talking about earlier with the Sweden-Denmark game being one where he had 33 points, as well as some of the Peach Jam. And then Link Academy is going to continue to play high-level competition this year, so there should be some more opportunities to see him play with talented teammates.
All right, Sherrell, I want you to wrap with this. What else is North Carolina looking for with this class? They now got Drake Powell and Elliot Cadeau, assuming he stays, but we really don't know yet. So what else is North Carolina looking for, with their current recruiting efforts?
Yeah, they could still be looking for a lead guard, to your point. We're not sure yet. So Boogie Flan still has an offer, and I don't think that's going to change because of Cadeau's commitment now. Whether or not Flan would want to come, depending on what UNC's backcourt might look like, is a different question. But I do think they'll continue to recruit him because he's another elite ball handler, and he's also from the New York area, so that is important for UNC these days. Then obviously Jaren Stevenson from Pittsburgh, goes to Seaforth High School, remains UNC's top target, I would say. Has had an offer since last October, so October of 2021. He's taken an official visit to Georgetown, unofficial visits to, I believe, NC State and Virginia, and has an official visit scheduled to Missouri in January. We expect him to take an official visit to UNC. So just kind of waiting to see what happens there. And then I would say the other active offers that are out, Ian Jackson is scheduled to visit in a couple of weeks, actually. I think January 6th for UNC's game against Notre Dame that weekend. He is another guard / wing from New York, if you're sensing a theme. And then James Brown, the big man from Chicago, already took an official visit to UNC, and he's just kind of mulling what his next steps are going to be. So those are what I would consider the active offers from UNC. And again, I don't think we'll definitely won't for this class. I don't know if we'll ever see a 5-man high school class again. So UNC is at 2, and I think 1 or 2 more, and they'll be done because they have had a lot of success so far with the portal, and I just don't think the days of 5-man high school classes are over. The overall thing I would say about Cadeau, in addition to what's already been said, is just the reemergence of UNC in New York. Hubert Davis has made it a huge, huge priority since he became the head coach. When he was an assistant coach, if you look at the New York players on the roster the last few years, RJ Davis, he committed under Roy Williams, but his lead recruiter was Hubert Davis. Cole Anthony was signed and committed under Roy Williams, but his lead recruiter was Hubert Davis. And then they've offered a bunch of other players who decided to go elsewhere from New York. Then they have offers to Jackson, to Flan, and now they have Cadeau from New Jersey committed, as well as Wilcher signed. So it is clear that New York, New Jersey is going to be prime recruiting territory for North Carolina moving forward. If you thought it was a one-time thing or a one-class thing, go ahead and dissuade yourself of that notion now, because it's here to stay.
Frank McGuire and Dean Smith are looking down fondly upon those developments with the track record that they had with guards from up in that area. All right, boys. Well, Christmas come late for the Tar Heels, but I hope that folks that have listened and watched this pod today have learned something and are excited to see Elliot Cadeau in a Carolina uniform. Fellas, I appreciate you making time for us. Thanks for bringing the insight and bringing the heat, kind of jumping in and being at the ready for these developments. But Sean Moran, Sherrell McMillan, shout out to Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring. Shout out to John Siegley for producing. I'm just Joey Powell. Appreciate you guys listening. This has been an emergency podcast from InsideCarolina.com, a coast to coast, talking about Elliot Cadeau's commitment to Hubert Davis and the Tar Heels. We will catch you guys next time on our regularly scheduled episodes of the Coast to Coast podcast, available wherever podcasts are sold or wherever you get your however they say that. Get your podcast from there. We'll talk to you guys sometime very soon. Appreciate you being a part of the show. Catch you down the road. Late.